see where we we are you see now, why is it doing this? Why can I not make this bigger now? You know, people say that the Mac is like so amazing, and I just find it just truly frustrating. Okay, so this is the last letter, you guys. This is we've been through the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, and this last letter has a bunch of different like some of the letters is just like one way to pronounce it, and it's just one form and so forth. This is one of those that has a couple of different forms and a couple of different pronunciations. This letter is called Taf. Some people call it Saf. So this letter is the last, and its numerical value is 400, and it makes the same sound as the letter Tet, which also makes the T sound. So I do not know. This, I don't know how to get this back. It says my screen sharing is paused because I just got a call. And
I can see your screen.
You can?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay. All right, let me try to see if I can make this really small. Okay, here we go. All right. Oh, that's the wrong one. Shoot. That's not what I wanted to do at all. Okay, you still there?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, here we go. All right. So here's tough. I was so good on a Windows machine, you guys. I know it doesn't seem that way, but okay, here's the letter tough. So it is in a couple of different fonts, and it looks similar to this letter, which you have already learned. This is the letter chet, but it has this little extra piece, which we're going to call a toe on the left foot to remind you that it's pronounced T as in toe. So you see how similar, look at this angle and this angle. It's so similar to a chet, but a chet goes straight down and the taf has like a little toe. You will sometimes see this letter with a dot inside it. And in some traditions, this is pronounced differently. So in the Ashkenazi tradition outside of Israel, this without the dot is usually pronounced like an S sound, and this with the dot is pronounced like a T sound. But in Israel, whether it has a dot or it doesn't have a dot, it is pronounced the same. This is why you have heard some people say Shabbos and some people say Shabbat. Some people say Sukkot and some people say Sukkot. Some people say Simchat Torah and some people say Simchas Torah. Some people say Beit HaMikdash and some people say Beis HaMikdash. Aleph Bet, Aleph Bet. There's a million examples of this. But what I wanted to introduce you to is the word emet. Okay, so here's the word emet. Right. And in the Talmud, we learned that the word emet means truth. And what is the connection between, now you see the very last letter of emet is the taf. Why is emet represented by the last letter, not the first letter? And the answer the Talmud gives is because the truth of the matter often doesn't become clear until the end of a journey, not in the beginning. But there's something else about this word emet that contrasts with the word sheker, which means something that's false. So emet is truth, sheker is false. And sheker is written shin kuf resh. Okay, so these are the when you're saying the aleph bet in order, shin kuf resh are the three letters that come before the taf, but they don't come in that order. The order in the aleph bet is kuf resh shin, but it's the same three letters. So it's these three letters come before taf. Emet is spelled Aleph, Mem, Tuf. Aleph is the first letter, Mem is the middle letter, and Tuf is the last letter. And the teaching from this is that that Emet is you have to search a little harder. The first letter, the first letter, the middle letter, the last letter spell Emet, but the letters of Sheker are close together according to the Talmud because lies are very common, easy to find. Okay, so that's that little teaching about Emet. And here's a few very common words that start with a Tuf: Torah, Todah, which you probably know that word, means thank you, and Tehillim, which is both, it means Psalms. It also means rockets. And so rockets is Tilim, very, very similar. And so often when there are rockets, we say Tehillim. Okay, so there's a letter Tuf. And the question is whether we want to do vowels, because you might notice that we've done only consonants, the 22 letters of the alphabet, and I haven't touched the vowels yet with you. Okay, so now get my screen aligned. I wish one of you could sit here with me and show me what I'm doing wrong, because I really don't know. Unbelievable. I apologize, as I do every week, for this not working. I don't know why. I can either see you or I can see my text, and I cannot see both. Okay. Pray for me. I think I got it now. Okay, so so I want to talk to you about Shema and the importance of this prayer. But the first point I want to make, which is kind of a point I've been making since we started studying together, and I just think it's such an essential part of understanding how Torah works, is this idea that the words in Torah, especially in the Bible, are never just the words. There's always deeper significance, and that's part of what what I'm trying to do. That it's never the simple meaning of the biblical passage. It's always deeper, and that's why we're studying together, so that I can bring you the some of the deeper significance. Like the last thing that I hope to do today is to show you the parallel between the Shema prayer and the 10 Commandments. It isn't obvious, and it's not something that if you don't study Torah that you would probably be able to figure out for yourself. And yet our sages say that there's a reason why Shema contains the words that it does. Let's do some overview. The Shema prayer is divided into 3 sections. The first verse is the part that I'm assuming you guys are the most familiar with, because it is considered the foundational, most essential declaration of faith. And those words, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. The Shema as a whole, especially the first paragraph, reinforces a couple of foundational ideas that we have spoken about over and over again: that God is the creator, that he's one, that there's no other gods. And this idea first comes to us through Abraham, who is the first one to teach this concept of monotheism. In his day, everybody was pagan. Basically, everybody was an idol worshiper. And he figured out this idea that there's the whole universe is all, it's all created by the same creator and sustainer of the universe. The second large theme is the necessity to accept the laws that God gave us in the Torah in our daily behavior, both in terms of, now these are Hebrew terms, I'll translate them, but you may not be familiar with them. Bein Adam lemakom, which means the laws that relate from a person to God, and Bein Adam lechavero, the laws that relate between one person and another person. So what would be an example of Bein Adam lemakom? What are some of the things that we have been asked to do that have to do with our relationship with God? So one of them obviously is prayer. Okay, that's one of the things that we do to maintain our relationship with God. But we have spoken about at least one of the Bein Adam Lechavero laws, and that is Lashon Hara, that is the prohibition against gossip. That doesn't have to do with our relationship with God. That has to do with our relationship with other people, keeping human relationships smooth and functioning and full of peace and so forth. Some other examples of Bein Adam Lechavero, between one person and another, would be the mitzvah to give charity, the mitzvah to go visit the sick, the mitzvah to bring people into your homes, especially for purposes of feeding them. So part of Shema is to accept the laws that God created out of faith, that God knows what's best for us, even when we don't understand his laws, because none of us can truly understand God's laws because his wisdom far exceeds ours. So God has, and we've spoken about this before, laws for Jews and laws for the rest of the world, ways to behave that are incumbent only on the Jews, and ways to behave or not behave that are incumbent on all of humanity. So that's the second idea. The first idea is that God is the creator and sustainer of the world. The second idea is that we're supposed to live according to the advice that he gives us in his Torah. The third is that we're expected to love God because we owe everything that we have to God. Now, some people ask, how can you command somebody to love? It's an emotion. You either feel it or you don't feel it. But what we're really being told is to remember that everything that we have that comes as a free gift from God, our life, our health, our families, our home, being able to think, being able to understand, being able to speak, being able to walk. God gives us air to breathe. God gives us sunshine. Everything that we have is a gift from a God who actually owes us nothing. There's no we're not born, with a contract saying you'll get these and these kinds of things. Okay. So, but these ideas of gratitude should bring us naturally to a love and appreciation of God. The fourth idea is to be prepared to sacrifice our lives rather than compromise our faith. We'll talk more about that as we go on. And the fifth idea is that the Torah is meant to be studied and taught to the next generation into perpetuity. The Torah is not something that can be mastered, but the goal is to, we say in Hebrew, to be osek, to be constantly or continuously occupied with learning Torah. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean 24/7 that you do nothing but study Torah, because people also have to make a living and they also have to take care of other responsibilities, but it means that the Torah should never be far from your thoughts. What, in this sense, when I'm speaking about Torah, I'm speaking about it in the largest context possible. That is God's guidelines for how we should live. Okay. I want to show you something that I'm going to try to paste into our chat. Tell me if you can see this. It's a line in Hebrew. I expect you to
Mhm.
read it, but you can see it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, oh my gosh, it is not correct. Let's try again. Some of the formatting is messed up. And it is messed up again. Okay, so I may have to do this without you seeing what I'm talking about. But the first line, the Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad, in many prayer books and in the Torah scroll, because this is a verse from Devarim, from Deuteronomy chapter 6, verse 4, there are two letters in this line that are enlarged. Now, how many of you have a Jewish prayer book next to you? Lori does. Okay. Can you open it up and tell me if in your prayer book where you have Shema, Jackie, you've got it close to you? I'm curious to know if it looks like that. The reason that this is done is there's a message in here. So the Shema is spelled Shin Mem Ayin, and the ayin is enlarged of the first word. And the last word in that line is echad, aleph, chet, daled. Okay. And the daled is enlarged. Ayin in the beginning and daled at the end. I'm waiting for one of you who has a Jewish prayer book to see.
So mine are enlarged, if that's what you're asking.
Yes.
In mine,
Okay.
yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
Lori, can you tell if yours are? I can't, the picture's too small. You have to unmute yourself. They are enlarged? Okay. So, and Natalie, you in yours as well. Okay. So in most prayer books, there's a message here. Okay. It's why would those letters, which you might not have ever noticed, are enlarged? Ayin and Dalet spell the word aid, which means a witness. And it alludes to the idea that the person reciting these words is bearing witness to the oneness of God and is declaring it to the world. Okay. So also in this verse, we find the words Adonai Eloheinu, which means the Lord is our God. Eloheinu means our God. What does that mean? Today, only a percentage of the world accepts that God is the creator and sustainer of the universe. Teresa, is it enlarged in yours as well? Are you in a prayer book or are you in a Tanakh? I can't hear you. You need to unmute yourself.
I have a prayer book.
Okay, and is it enlarged, this line, these two letters?
Just the two letters, yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so for those of you that don't have a book handy or whatever, it's a good thing to look up. Okay, so right now I was saying that we say the Lord is our God because we understand that we are in a stage of history where we are part of the small percentage of the world that accepts God as the creator and sustainer of the universe, but that ultimately the entire world will recognize him as the one and only true God. That is a messianic vision. And as we learned last week, in this verse, the name for God is spelled Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey. And we talked last week about how in that name of God includes all of the permutations of past, present, and future. Haya, Hoveh, and Yihyeh. Okay. Now, the word echad, which is the last word of that first verse, has two connotations. One is that there is no God other than Hashem. And the other is that God himself is a complete unit. So we may perceive God with many different moods and many different roles. God can be angry, God can be kind, God can be merciful, God can be wise, different attributes. But they're not contradictory and they're not indications of other gods. So there are ancient faith systems that assumed or taught that different gods had different personalities, but we understand that all of that is Hashem Echad. It's all the same God. Now, when we say this verse, we emphasize, the correct way to say it is to emphasize the last syllable, which is Chad. Okay, so Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Okay, the last syllable is made up of two Hebrew letters, and now that you guys have been studying letters, it's, I hope, a little easier for you to understand these kinds of teachings. The last two letters are Chet and Daled. Okay, the Chet has a numerical value of 8, and we are meant to think about the fact that God is the master of the earth and also the 7 levels of heaven. I'm not going to get into that, but there is a teaching that the upper part of the universe, however you understand that, is made up of 7 levels. And each of these levels is named somewhere in Tanakh. I'm not an expert on it, but if it's something you wanted to know more about, I could share with you more about it another time. The last letter of Echad is Daled. The numerical value of Daled alludes to the fact that God is a master in all four directions. Okay, so everything about this is pointing us to, embedded in the Hebrew, pointing us to our faith. Now, the 3 letters of the word Shema, Shin, Mem, Ayin, also form an acrostic for the first 3 Hebrew words in Isaiah chapter 40, verse 26. Se'u marum einechem, lift up your eyes on high. What does that mean? It means recognize God. Okay, so Isaiah chapter 40, verse 26, lift up your eyes on high and see who created these, who takes out their host by number. All of them he calls by name because of his great might and because he is strong in power. No one is missing. Okay, so there's another hint to recognizing God. You're probably familiar with the fact it's a pretty universal custom that when you say this first verse that you cover your eyes. So the most common way is just to cover your eyes like this, okay, with the palm of your hand. If you're wearing, I don't know, when I do it, I try to move my glasses out of the way. What's the point of that? The point of that is to cut out any distractions during the time you're saying this verse. So you have a lot of concentration on the 6 words of this verse. But there's something very interesting that Sephardim in Israel do. They make a shin, you know that letter because we learned it last week. They make a shin with their middle 3 fingers, and then they do this, okay? They put, so this letter is like, this is the shin, and this is like a Dalet, and this is like a Yud. And what does that spell? It spells Shaddai, which is another name of God, which I think we talked about that last week as well, okay? So in America, you'll mostly see this, but in Israel, you will often see this. It's a very cool custom. Okay. If what follows there is a line, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. This line does not come from scripture. It means blessed is the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. Where does this line come from? It doesn't come from scripture. So there's 2 stories. One is that when Jacob was on his deathbed, surrounding his deathbed were all of his 12 sons. And his children affirmed their loyalty to God by saying, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. And in that context, Israel is the name, it's a biblical name that God gave Jacob, that God gave Yaakov. Okay, so they're saying, listen, Dad, but they're calling him by his special biblical name. We are all on the same page with you, and so forth. And he responds, blessed be the name of God, blessed be the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. Now, here's the full story. Okay, so the story goes like this. In Bereshit, in Genesis chapter 49, verse 1, Jacob calls all of his sons together and he says, gather and I will tell you. What is it he wants to tell them? He wants to reveal to them when it's going to be the end of days. But because of, I guess it wasn't the right time, and so the divine presence left him and he forgot. He no longer knew when it was going to be the end of days. He couldn't ask, he couldn't tell them. So he thought maybe the reason that this happened is because one of my kids is not a believer in God. So he knows that from his grandfather came his father Yitzchak, but also came his uncle Yishmael. This is that's his father, his grandfather. And from his father, he and his twin brother Esau were also born. So he knows that he's thinking maybe among my children, there's an idol worshiper, and his children respond with the reassurance that none of them are idol worshippers. And they say, listen, Israel, listen, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. In the same way that you have only one God in your heart, so we only have one God in our heart. And that is when Jacob said, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuto Le'olam V'ed, blessed be the name of the glory of his kingdom forever and ever. So he was relieved by that. That's one story. There's another story that Moses heard this formulation from angels, and he taught them to Israel. We don't say these words out loud generally in prayer. We whisper them because we are not on the spiritual level of angels. The exception to that is at the end of Yom Kippur, when the Jews have fasted and prayed for 25 hours, we do say these words out loud because we're assumed to have reached the level of angels through our fasting and prayer. Okay. But again, that part does not come from scripture. So let's go back to the paragraph, the rest of that, the paragraph that follows in Devarim in the book of Deuteronomy, chapter what chapter 6, verses 5 through 9. Okay. And what is it talking about? It's talking about the particular way in which faith should be lived, to love God with all your being, to teach it to your children, to recite it when you wake up and when you lie down, to bind it as a sign on your body. So let's break that down a little bit. Now, I sent all of you, if you don't have a prayer book in front of you, I sent all of you a link to the Hebrew and English words, and maybe it might be helpful for you to have that on your screen as well. But I will tell you a translation. It may not be an exact match, but it should be close enough that you can understand what I'm speaking about. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Okay. You shall love, the word you shall love in Hebrew is vahafta, but it can also be read as meaning that you should make God beloved by others through how? Through the way that you behave, how you act, how you conduct yourself, what kind of a godly person you are in the world. If people know that you believe in God and it causes you to behave a certain way, it makes God look good in the world, and that is an extended part of the relationship between us and God. I'll give you a very specific example of this. Some years ago, I was in a grocery store. It happens to be a kosher grocery store, and I paid with cash. And when I counted out my change, I saw that I had gotten too much change. Now, a Western way of thinking would be, oh, wow, I just made a couple bucks. But because of being mindful of this, I'm not saying I'm like this great holy person, but it is something I do try to do. I went back to the cashier and I said, you gave me too much change. Now, you don't have to be a Jew to do something like that. You don't have to be even a believer in God to do something like that, but it is the correct thing to do. And for people who were looking on, here I am as a obviously religious Jew, and I am returning money that does not belong to me. It's a very small example of what it means that through our actions, God can become beloved. But the ideal is to follow God's teaching out of love and not out of fear, and certainly not just out of habit. So I had a conversation with somebody in our group, I don't remember exactly who it was, who was asking about when Jews pray, sometimes she hears Jews pray and it sounds like kind of like they're mumbling. And the truth is that unlike in some faith systems where prayer is a 1 day a week kind of an activity, Jews pray a lot, and we make a lot of blessings throughout the day, and we mention God's name many times throughout the day. And sometimes it does come out as like if I'm going to eat an apple, I know there's a certain blessing I'm supposed to make before I eat this apple. And I'm not necessarily thinking about how amazing God is and how he, took this little apple seed and created a tree. And from there, I got my apple and all the wondrous things that go into it. I just want to eat this apple. So I just mumbled these words. Not ideal. Okay. But it does happen out of familiarity and repetition. So the truth is that it's a goal. It's always a goal to have focused concentration on the prayers and the blessings that you say. And one of the ideas of going more deeply into these words of Shema and the entirety of Shema, which some people, maybe you didn't even know there was a whole bunch more than just those first 6 words, that going into the entirety of it is in order that when you're saying it, you may have some of these thoughts may pop back in. So there's another idea that one should serve God with all your emotions, okay? All their emotions and desires, with all your heart, even to the point of giving up your life for God with all your soul, and even at the cost of your wealth, with all of your, so there's different translations here. Some say with all your might, with all your possessions. Now, what does that mean? So one example is that the Jewish people, and this, as far as I know, only applies to the Jewish people, are required to give up our lives rather than transgress 3 particular sins. One is murder, one is idol worship, and one is illicit sex, illicit sexual relations. So the classic example that's given here is that if you're in a situation where somebody's got a gun pointed at you and they say to you, worship this idol, bow to this idol, or I will kill you, you are required to die. That is what this is talking about. Even at the cost of your life, with all of your soul, you are loyal to God. If somebody has a gun pointed at you and said, you kill this person or I'm going to kill you, you are required to give up your life. Hopefully in our time, most people are not faced with that very difficult choice, but I just want to explain to you what it means. Now, the truth is that countless Jews have given up their lives rather than give up their faith out of a love of God. And this happened, I'll just give you a couple of examples. You can probably give me many more. In the time of Antiochus, this is the Hanukkah story.
Epiphany.
Yes, exactly. He tried to Hellenize the Jews. He tried to get the Jews to stop, to be more like Greeks and not so much like Jews. During the Crusades, when Jews were persecuted, during the Inquisition is the most famous example, when Jews were basically given the choice to forcibly convert to Christianity or to be killed. Okay, so there were obviously some people who converted, at least on the face of it, but there were many who either left their homes or died in that time. Okay. And I always say we should never be so tested. The next line is, and these words which I command you today shall be upon your heart. The idea of the words that I command you today, the Torah was given over 3,000 years ago. What does that mean? It means that we ideally should relate to it with as much enthusiasm, as much freshness, as if God just explained to us today how we're supposed to serve him. Now, again, it's a goal, right? So some days, some years, some months, whatever, we may feel more inspired, less inspired. I'll tell you, besides learning Torah with you guys every week, I have some other opportunities to study, and I have 3 study partners. I might have told you about this. And with each of them, we're studying a different book. And so one of us will read a little bit about in the book, and then we'll discuss what do we think it means, because it's not always so clear and tell stories and how we understand this and so forth. And when I do that, I feel very much like God is talking to me. I feel very much like I'm so grateful to have the gift of Torah and to be able to study it on my level. Obviously, there are people who have much more Torah knowledge than I do, and they study on their level. But on my level, studying Torah is a pathway into being excited and connected to God. And I hope that it is for you as well. And that's maybe why you keep coming back, which I really think is so lovely. And I appreciate that you do that every week. The next line, you shall teach them. Some translations say diligently to your children or thoroughly to your children. You shall speak of them when you're in your house and when you walk on the road, when you lie down and when you rise up. So one of the ways we keep Torah alive is by teaching it. In this passage, it means teaching it to the next generation. There are in every generation Jews who leave the teaching of Torah to live either a secular life or to accept a different faith system. But there's also the phenomenon of Jews like me who return to Torah after a generation or two of non-observant ancestors. But the idea is that I'm speaking now specifically about the Jewish community, and then I want to talk about the nations. the Jewish community has a responsibility to continue to teach the Torah to successive generations, or else the Torah just dies out. But we have spoken about it in this context. I want to say again that God gave the Torah for the purpose of sharing it with the rest of the world, with the universal wisdom of Torah with the rest of the world. And because for at least the last 2,000 years, we have neglected to do our job, it is only in this generation, and it's really, I would say, probably only in the last 15 or 20 years, and much more so year after year, that you have Jews like me, many who are English speaking, many who are living in the land of Israel, who are actively teaching Torah to the rest of the world. Now, we are not roping anybody in and forcing them under pain of death to come and study Torah, but we are making avenues available to share Torah with the nations of the world, for those people who are interested. And that is part of this idea of keeping the Torah alive, is spreading its wisdom to the rest of the world. Okay, the next verse is, you shall bind them as a sign upon your hand, and they shall be a reminder between your eyes. Now, literally, the word used is totafot, which doesn't appear anywhere else. Our rabbis say this is a reference to tefillin, which is a mitzvah for men. And is there anybody who has no idea what tefillin is? You've never seen it? Anybody? Okay. It is generally scriptures in 4 compartments in a leather box that men place on their left arm near the heart, and on their forehead near the brain. And the symbolism of this is that we connect all of our physical abilities by the arm, emotional, the heart, and intellectual by the head, that we direct all of that to God. That's part of the symbolism of tefillin. Okay. And the next verse is, you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates. So you're probably familiar, I'm assuming you're familiar with the idea of a mezuzah, which is a scroll that has biblical passages in it. And and it includes God's name, and we put it on the doorposts of our home. Some people only put it on their front door. The correct way to do it is to put it on every door in your house except the bathroom, to identify it as a home that is, I'll say, consecrated to God. So when I say this line at night before I go to sleep, there's a version of Shema that you say just like the last thing that you say before you go to sleep. And this idea of writing them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, I picture every doorway in our home, not the bathroom doors, the doorways that have a mezuzah in my head. In fact, in a couple of apartments ago, we had an outdoor entrance. So now we're inside a building, but we had an outdoor entrance. Laura, you were at that apartment, you may remember, in Male Adumim. And so I had them build a gate so that I could put a mezuzah on it. Now I don't have any gates to put a mezuzah on, but I wanted one specifically so that I could mark it as, I mean, obviously we were in a Jewish community in Israel, obviously it's a Jewish home, but a mezuzah is a sign that the entire home and all our possessions are dedicated to and used in a way that pleases God. Now there are many people, and you may be among them, who don't let certain things into their house because they are not pleasing to God. Generally, I'm speaking about books or other kind of media that are not so kosher, but I have seen, it isn't true in my case, but there are families that if a toy has a non-kosher animal on it, they won't put it in their house, or games that are considered inappropriate for whatever, everybody has different standards about this. My husband, in his synagogue in Baltimore, we once had a carnival. I guess it must have been Purim. It was a carnival, and we invited the whole community, which included all kinds of Jews. And there was this blow up like bouncy house. And on the outside of the bouncy house, it was decorated. It had, I remember it had dolphins. I don't know what else it had, but dolphins are not kosher fish. And there were some families that would not let their children in the bouncy house because it was decorated with non-kosher animals. That is not a standard that we keep. We don't eat dolphins, but I wouldn't keep a toy away from a child because it looked like a dolphin or it looked like an animal that wasn't kosher. But the idea is what you put in your house, what you allow into your house is a reflection of your spiritual commitments. The other thing in these verses, we spoke about tefillin and mezuzah, they are symbols of practical observance of God's instructions on how to live. Laura, you want to say something? Or you want to tell a story?
A practical question about the mezuzah. Why do they hang them leaning?
Oh, that's such a great question. Okay, and I happen to know the answer right now without looking it up. Okay, so there were two rabbis, Rambam and his grandson, who's referred to as I don't remember. It'll come to me, begins with a T. Anyway, the Rambam had an opinion that the mezuzah should be straight up, and his grandson had an opinion that the mezuzah should be on the door like this, vertical and horizontal. And so, as a measure of compromise and out of respect one for the other, the law is that we hang it on an angle. Isn't that cool? And it hangs on an angle facing into the room that you're walking into. Okay.
Well, that's
Um,
interesting.
yeah, I thought so too. And the reason I know that is because I recently read my grandson a story about this. There's like this little Jewish book about why the mezuzah is hung on an angle. And now I may have the two rabbis wrong. Maybe it was Rashi, and I can find out if you want to know. But there was this great rabbi and his grandson, and they didn't agree, and that was their compromise. Okay, what's that?
I
Laura,
said,
you want
thank
to...
you. Really
Sure.
cool. Very
Yeah.
interesting.
Okay, so the next paragraph. So that's the first paragraph of Shema. Let's see how much time we have. Okay. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're only halfway through. The next paragraph comes from the book of Deuteronomy, from Devarim, chapter 11, verses 13 through 21. And it specifies what happens when God's commands are heeded and if they're not. So we have a setup where God didn't just create us and say, go do your own thing. He gave us boundaries for how we're supposed to behave. Okay, things we're supposed to do, things we're not supposed to do, and so forth. And so it says, if then you obey the commandments that I command you on this day, to love the Lord your God and to serve him with all your heart and all your soul. That's what we were just told. What is the reward? God will grant rain for your land in its season, the early rain and the late rain, and you'll gather in your grain and your wine and your oil, and I'll provide grass in your field for your cattle, and you will eat your fill. Okay, so the idea is very connected to the land of Israel, that submission to God's command results in rain in its proper season, and it results in grain, wine, oil, grass in the fields, and abundant food. That basically is a symbol for material blessing. Okay, so so that's part of the promise. The next part: take care not to be lured away and serve other gods and bow to them. For the Lord's anger will flare up against you, and he will shut up the skies, and there will be no rain, and the ground will not yield its produce, and you will soon perish from the land that God gave you. Okay, if God's will is flouted, if foreign gods are worshipped, none of these blessings will come about. First, there's famine, no rain. Okay, and if that doesn't cause the people living in the land to repent, the next level is exile. You will soon perish from the good land that the Lord has given you. Okay. The next section is impress these words on your heart, bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them be a symbol on your forehead. That is again a reference to tefillin. Teach them to your children. We've heard this before. To speak of them when you stay at home and when you're away, when you lie down, when you rise up. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. And again, in order that your children will endure in the land that God swore to your ancestors to assign them, as long as there's heaven over the earth. So when speaking about educating children, it's interesting that the verse uses a plural form of the word to teach, indicating that educating children is a communal responsibility, specifically educating children in Torah. I'm going to skip this part. Okay, and let's go to the final section because I really want to have time to show you how the words of the Shema were chosen to reflect the Ten Commandments. The next part comes from the book of Bamidbar, the book of Numbers, chapter 15, verses 37 to 41, and it contains basically 5 ideas. The mitzvah of tzitzit, which I will talk about, the redemption from Egypt, the constant obligation to do God's will, the suppression of heresy, and the avoidance of sinful thoughts. All of these are part of the process of being guided to holiness. So the guidelines of Shema are to continually remind us how to kind of stay on the path, connected to God, so that we can live a holy life. So this is so cool. The Lord said to Moses as follows: "Speak to the children of Israel and instruct them to make for themselves fringes on the corners of their garments throughout their generations, and let them attach a cord of blue to the fringe of each corner. That shall be your fringe, to look at it and recall all the commandments of the Lord and observe them." Now, who is Moses going to speak to? Who did God tell him to speak to? He says, speak to the children of Israel. In Hebrew, that expression is B'nai Yisrael. Literally, it means the sons of Israel. We understand this from another verse in the book of Exodus to mean the males. The term B'nai Yisrael, when it appears in the Hebrew, is what this translation I have says, speak to the Israelite people, which sounds very general. But in Hebrew, it says B'nai Yisrael, the sons of Israel, meaning the males. What is the Torah has another way of referring to when it's talking about women, and that term is Beit Yaakov, literally the house of Jacob. That is a reference to women. Where will you see this? If you look in Shemot, if you look in the book of Exodus, chapter 19, verse 3, Moses goes up to, he's on Mount Sinai, he's about to get the Torah, and God says to him, "So should you say to the house of Jacob and tell the sons of Israel." Okay, I'm doing this in English, but what does it mean? If you look at this verse, it means that God is telling Moshe to speak to the women first. "So shall you say to the house of Jacob," Beit Yaakov, that means the women, "and tell the sons of Israel," B'nai Yisrael, that means the men. I think that's so cool. So I hope that you also think that that's that's interesting. That when God, in other words, when God gave the Torah to Moses, he said, teach the women first. But that's also how we know that tzitzit in general is a mitzvah that applies specifically for men. Because when in the Shema, in Devarim, when Moses is repeating what God told him, he said, speak to B'nai Israel, speak to the children of Israel, meaning speak to the men. Women are exempt from the mitzvah of tzitzit. If they want to wear them, they may, but it's not counted as a mitzvah for women. I'm going to skip all this stuff because I know we don't have like a lot of time, but basically this paragraph also fulfills the requirement. I don't know where the hour goes. It's probably because I spent all that time trying to get my documents set up correctly on my screen. But anyway, this paragraph also fulfills the commandment to remember the Exodus from Egypt every day, because this is for the Jewish people, this is our eternal relationship with God. As a result of the fact that he freed us and brought us out of Egypt, he has an eternal claim on us as a people, and we're obligated to remember that every day. And the last part is, so that you do not follow your heart and your eyes in your lustful urge. Thus you shall be reminded to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. There again is that concept of what the Shema is telling us, is all these different ways that the goal of life is to live a life of holiness. And it ends with, "I am the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am the Lord your God." So again, do not follow what your heart covets. The heart covets what the eye sees, which leads the body to sin. Okay. And here's the last thing that I want to finish with, this idea that the Shema contains a reference to the 10 Commandments. Now, we spoke a few weeks ago, I don't know if it was in a class or if it was in the WhatsApp group, but we spoke a few weeks ago about the idea that the 10 Commandments, the Jewish listing of them, is slightly different than in a Christian reading. So I'm going to do the Jewish listing. Okay, so the first one is, "I am the Lord your God," which sounds an awful lot like "the Lord is our God." You see the parallel? "I am the Lord your God" is the commandment, and Shema says, "I am the Lord is our God." Now, they're not all that clean. That one's really obvious, okay? The second commandment, you shall have no other gods. The Shema says the Lord is one. Okay, meaning there are no other gods. The third commandment, you shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Okay, and the Shema says you shall love the Lord your God, because if you love somebody, or if you worship somebody, or somebody who's in a position of um, leadership over you, you would not use their name in vain. That one's a little bit of a stretch. But here's the fourth one. Remember the Shabbat and keep it holy. And the line from Shema, and these words which I command you this day, the Torah was given on Shabbat. So it's a reminder of Shabbat. Honor your father and mother. Okay. And this corresponds to teach them diligently to your children, teach your children to honor their elders. It's a whole thing about family relationships. Okay, this is another one I think is a little bit of a stretch, but you shall not murder. And that corresponds to the line in the Shema, when you walk on the way, because according to this commentary, most murders are committed on the street, like in public, in the outdoors. You shall not commit adultery is aligned with as you lie down, because for the most part, adultery is committed when you're laying down. You shall not steal. Okay, so we have the line, bind them as a sign upon your hands. The reminder to not use your hands to take what doesn't belong to you. Number 9, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. And this is a reference to they shall be totafot between your eyes. This is a reference to tefillin. You should only offer evidence. You should only speak about whatever you've actually seen with your own eyes. That not bearing false witness means not lying, not saying I saw something when I didn't see it. You can only bear witness according to Jewish law and according to, well, I guess otherwise, even in a secular court system, I'm speaking now about American court, if a situation, if evidence is presented, but it's not firsthand evidence, it's referred to as circumstantial evidence, and it's thrown out of court. So even in the Western court system, this idea is that you can only offer evidence or witness about something that you've actually seen with your eyes. And the last is you shall not covet your neighbor's house, and so on and so forth. And that corresponds to you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and upon your gates, meaning you write them on your doors, not on doors belonging to your neighbors. Okay, so that is a deeper dive into the Shema prayer. And remember that Shema is not just the first 6 words. That's the way we refer to the prayer, because that's the very first significant word of the prayer. But it refers to these 3 passages that for the most part come directly out of Scripture. And the rabbis put them together in this prayer. If you buy this correspondence that I've just shared with you about here's the 10 commandments and here's how that idea is alluded to in Shema, that the Shema prayer serves a bunch of purposes, and it is one of those purposes is to echo the 10 commandments. So the last thing that I'll say before I open it up for any questions or comments that you might have is this is usually the first prayer that we teach our children. And it is also the last thing, if you have the consciousness of the fact that your life is almost over, this traditionally, according to Jewish law, is the last thing that you should be saying. That you, even as you are about to pass into the next world, whether in a peaceful way out of, like a long-term illness or something like that, or in a violent way, and you know that you are about to die, you're supposed to die with the words of Shema Yisrael on your lips, which I find that very, I mean, God willing, I should have the presence of mind and the cognitive ability to be able to do exactly that in my final moments. But that is the goal.
Oh my gosh, Rivka, I have got goosebumps. I've got to tell y'all this hostage story. Y'all might have seen this video months ago. One of the hostages that was captured, or not captured, excuse me, one of the people at the Nova Music Festival who actually escaped. I misspoke. She was not a hostage, but she was running for her life. And she talks about that experience when they were driving their car, and they were very close to being caught. And she was said I was secular. I didn't really. I'm not a religious Jew, but she said I thought I was going to die, and I said the Shema. That's what she was saying. Like she was running from the terrorist.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. Right. So can you imagine having that degree of and especially for somebody who hasn't probably not a lot of practice praying, and that's what pops into her mind. That is what her soul instructed her to do at that moment. Thank God, Baruch Hashem, that she lived, and she lived to tell that story, because even just the telling of the story, I think it is inspirational for the rest of us, right? Okay, so we have like 2 minutes left. Does anybody else want to say anything or comment? I'm just reminding you, this is our last class until September. I will put like a survey, I guess, a poll of some kind in our WhatsApp group to see what you might want to do. I want to tell you how but before I was getting ready to teach, my husband asked me, did I feel emotional? I said, I don't right now, but I might at the end of class. And so I do kind of. I want to tell you, I've said it many times, but I want to say to you, what an unbelievable privilege it is for me to take the Torah that God has shown me and to share it with the rest of you, because the things that you say to me and the ways that you appreciate the kinds of things that I've shared with you over the last 6 or 7 months, I'm not exactly sure how long we've been doing this. It has elevated me. And we have this custom at our Shabbat table that on Friday night we go around the table, and Lori probably knows this, Natalie knows this. I'm thinking who's here that's been at my Shabbat table, that we ask people to say something that they're grateful for that happened to them since last Shabbat. And very often an encounter with one of you, either privately or in the WhatsApp group, is really like the highlight of what I share and what I'm grateful for. So this is just, we say in Hebrew, lehitraot, which means basically see you later. It's not shalom. I'm not saying goodbye. I'm going to go spend time with my family and decompress a little bit from the intensity of life in Israel. And I very much look forward to being back with you in September. And just really, truly, from the depths of my heart, thank you very much for the privilege of studying with me. Okay. Having said that whole emotional thing, anybody else and want to say anything before we finish up? Or Laura, you're talking, but you're yeah.
And Rivka, thank you for all the hours that you spend preparing, because it's not just doing it. I know
That's true.
it's a
That is true.
sorry.
But I mean, when I'm doing it, what am I doing? I'm also engaged in Torah study, right? I have to
Sure.
go through all of my sources and say, what of this I think will resonate for you guys? Because some stuff is not so, like the laws of when we say Shema and all that, it's in a lot of sources, but it's not really so relevant. So, but yes, it does take hours every week, but I'm so grateful and so appreciate the opportunity to be able to share with you. Okay.
So I also wanted to say how much I appreciate. I'm one that bugs you in your private message all the time.
Not
And I
bugs.
appreciate, I try not to too much, but I appreciate, I cannot tell you how much I appreciate, the time that you take and, just either letting me talk or ask questions, because I know it takes a lot of time out of your week and we're all busy, but this has been invaluable for me, and I also wanted to ask, how many times a day as a Jewish woman do you pray the Shema? Are you obligated to pray the Shema?
Okay. That's a really good question. The classic answer to that is twice a day. But it's not actually something that I do. I don't twice a day is what men are obligated to do. I have to check on this because I think that women are not actually obligated in Shema. I have always, always, always said always, like as long as I've been religious, said the first paragraph before I go to sleep. But in terms of the full Shema, now today I can tell you I say it once a day in the morning as part of my morning prayer. Men are, as usual, you know, men have a more formal prayer. You certainly can say it twice a day. If you said it once a day, that would put you like head and shoulders above most of humanity. So, but if you want an exact answer in Jewish law, I will have to research that and get back to you. Okay.
I have one question, sorry. When you say the Shema, do you stand and do you face east, or is there a requirement on that?
Okay. I do not stand, and I do not think that okay, so I hardly ever go to shul, so I don't think people who say it in shul stand either. And in general, okay, so where I live south of Jerusalem, so generally in prayer, I face Jerusalem, which is north. Depending on where in the world you are, the idea is not to face east. The idea is to face Jerusalem. So depending on where you are in the world, you have to orient yourself toward that. Natalie, I don't know if you saw this, but Jackie has shared that, Jackie, who's new with us today, she wants to say hi to you because you signed your book for her, and she had one
Yes.
of the first copies of your book. Yeah?
I remember your name. I remember your name, Jackie. No, I didn't see the comment because I'm on my phone, so I don't see all the comments. Thank you. And hi, Jackie.
How nice. That's nice that you made a connection. Okay, I'm going to finish up. I'm going to wish you all a good summer. And I'm always available to you, except if I'm in transit. I'm available to you on WhatsApp, and I look forward to seeing you guys all again in September. See you in September. Bye, guys.
Thank you.